today I'm interviewing Bob Bicknell Knight, who is an artist and a curator and very much I suppose one could call him almost an artistic entrepreneur in a way, although he's not doing it for financial reasons as such. Bob, people use a variety of terms for what we're both interested in, computer art, digital art, new media art, net art. Do you have any strong preferences?
I go with digital art usually, because it doesn't have, I think it's broader than like new media, or a new media is very, for me, new, like, oh, this is contemporary work, whereas obviously digital art has been going on for quite some years now. And then like net art is very particular to internet-based art. So I think digital art is the broadest way to encompass everything that I'm interested in. So I go with digital art.
I mean, your website says you're working in installation, sculpture, moving image, net art, and other digital mediums. Would you care just to summarise what your own contribution to art so far?
In terms of medium, or just in general, or?
In terms of medium, and also in terms of more like the artist's statement of what you're trying to achieve, or what you.
Yeah, I think I do all those things and try to do all those things within my own practice, and try to be as diverse as possible with what I make. So if I make a video, I'm going to make an installation with it and that kind of thing, or make physical works from that. And I think that's the best way possible to diversify within kind of an art world that doesn't strictly go with just video artists. But then a lot of my own work kind of involves the digital and what that is, and in a very broad way, but then going into various things like surveillance culture and that being permeating, and that's something I'm working on at the moment, and kind of ideas of that. And then recently a lot of stuff to do with automation and AI and automated empathy, and kind of those kind of new areas that are being explored in the media, and kind of taking from that and making work about that, I guess.
I liked your interview with Alexa, and
the
latest business. That's an example of that.
Yeah. That was like a broad, a wider thing, just trying to sum up everything that's going on at the moment with the kind of controversy surround automation, and kind of trying to confront some of the false, like very much media heavy kind of affiliations that has, or where the media has kind of taken things out of context. And that that was like the before, and then after that piece was written, then it progressed to a different work that was a future work, which was envisioning Alexa reflecting on our conversation that we'd had, and reflecting on what's happened since, where humanity died, and then reflecting on that, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, in a very, very bleak way. But
what started your interest in the digital side of things? I mean, did you start off as an artist and then become a digital artist, or digital from?
I think I used to make lots of sculptures with my hands, and it was like very ephemeral and very like this is kind of transplanting my emotions onto these sculptures, and being very like, this is what it means, and being very touchy-feely with it. And then when I actually came to London, I went to, it was about 3 years ago now, that I went to the John Rathman exhibition at the Zabludovich collection, and that really influenced me. And kind of, I hadn't really been kind of shown that you could make work and get somewhere with digital art or with video art in general. So then that was like, he's making work about video game subcultures, and that's like, that's something I'm interested in. I could make some work about that. So that's what really started me off making, or opened my eyes to there being this kind of work out there. And then obviously that opened a world that I wasn't aware of, and I'm now more aware of. Yeah.
Do you have a technical background?
No, not in terms of like doing that kind of thing. No, I played a lot of video games before, but in terms of technical side of things, no. I know a lot of artists do that, and I totally value when they do like a BA in computer stuff and then go on to do an MA in art, and it's like you can totally see where you've come from and the techniques you've brought from that, which is fantastic, but I'm not one of those people.
Do you feel that here you are at Chelsea, which is, if I may say so, traditional art school. Do you feel that you're a lone pioneer? Do you feel you're doing things different from what everybody else is doing?
Oh, in the broader scheme of things, definitely not. But in terms of at Chelsea, it's rare that I'll see work that I'll be like, ooh, that's my kind of work. It's so rare anyway when you kind of go out into the world and it's like, you know what, that's a work that I'd have loved to make, and that's what I always love seeing. It's like, oh, I'd have loved to make that, and I rarely get there at Chelsea. And then out in the world, obviously, you do get that a lot. But it is a little bit odd here. It's lots of people making, but you know, it is still people. You explain what you're doing, and people get it. Your tutors understand, and it is interesting, but it is a little bit backward. But I don't, you know, I don't know which school would be, maybe like Goldsmiths or CSM maybe, or places like that. But yeah, as we were saying earlier, I think all London spaces are quite similar in what they're doing at the moment.
It's a historical tension. And, it's interesting to what extent it is and isn't being resolved in various places. Yes. But in terms of establishing a sort of digital practice, I mean, you're not entirely digital, but a partly digital practice.
Yeah.
Have you found that more or less difficult than you would have been if you were a painter? That's a silly question, but you know what I mean.
In terms of like people kind of understanding or being able to do that or being allowed to do that?
Well, all of them really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a matter of encouragement, isn't it? It's a question of whether you can find the opportunities to do what you want to do and to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I think to be taken seriously, obviously that's like, it's like a classic thing. If it's like to do with like your parents, for example, if like you come home from art school and it's like, yes, I've been doing this, and it's like, you haven't been painting, or something very stereotypical like that. But I think like digital art is valued out like in the world of arts and becoming more so.
Yes.
So I think it's not so much being like dragged back to do something similar. I don't think anyone stopped me from doing that. I think it was myself stopping or thinking that wasn't a thing, and then being like, oh, it is a thing. It's totally fine for me to do that.
I was going to ask you which digital artists you most admire, but I've just been to the Is This It exhibition that you organised in Docklands, so I think I've got some idea from that of who you admire. Would you like to say something about how you set that up?
I'm very upfront about this, that all the projects at the moment that I do are unfunded. So there is a certain aspect of compromise in a lot of the curation that I do offline. Online, artists are a lot more willing to give up like some of their time. So if you contact an artist who's quite famous and might have a video of theirs on Vimeo, it'll always be like, oh, that's usually totally fine, and I usually expect a response. But then when I'm asking people to kind of put more time in, or like contact their galleries and be like, oh, would you be able to loan this art out for this person? It's a lot harder to do that when you can't pay anyone. So a lot of those people I'd worked with before and had a professional relationship with, and then some of them I do contact, and so a lot of the people for the books I contact randomly, because it's obviously great to talk to these people who I do admire and who are quite big, and they're usually great. But then when it comes to exhibiting, it's harder. So usually I get people that are usually London-based and just email them. And then some of them I know are out of the country, but then they might be represented by UK galleries. So 3 of the artists in the last show at Arbite Gallery, Meeting Group Bicknell, Dominic Despirito and Olga Fedorova, they were all people who were represented by Anka Kolte's gallery. So I know Anka and just got in contact with her about borrowing those works. And then other works, it's just about meeting people and emailing. And a lot of what I do involves emailing and kind of showing what I've done before and showing that hopefully I'm doing interesting stuff. So people are like, oh, well, I'm okay to give some of my labor to you for free, because maybe in the future there'll be something that I can be involved with or something like that, hopefully. So yeah, a lot of the times that I find these people is through the internet, through Instagram, or going to shows beforehand that I've seen them in, and I'm like, oh, they could be interesting, and then looking them up more, and yeah.
And then approaching them or their gallery and just asking you
Yeah,
to contribute?
yeah. Usually I go for the artist first, because it's usually a lot easier. If you get the artist on board, then the gallery is usually totally fine with it. Obviously that sometimes isn't the case, but usually artists on board, and they're like, oh, do this, and then it's always been great, or managing or doing these things with galleries, because they're always like, oh yeah, you can come and take the work tomorrow, which is fantastic. Yeah.
When you do something like that exhibition in Docklands, do you have a particular audience in mind? Do you have any what sort of, how can you contextualise it?
I want to keep growing my audience. I know I have quite a young user base or audience base who follow me, because a lot of the stuff that I do is through internet-based stuff. So a lot of it's about growing my Instagram, my Facebook, the Facebook profiles, and getting people involved with that. And that is usually the only real promotion that I do for these shows, which is kind of weird. But as I'm operating on such a small budget, which is my own funds, it's quite hard to get it out there. But obviously getting it sent to websites and getting it promoted through them. But I think analog promotion is slightly dead at the moment, / I don't have the money to like print off a load of posters and then all the time to go around, or to get like a billboard or anything mental like that.
I noticed you put that particular exhibition up as a Facebook event, and when I looked at the number of people who'd expressed interest in it, it was an extremely interesting list. I mean, people from the major art colleges and academics and all this sort of thing. I tend to do a thing where I just add anyone on Facebook, because I love adding quite famous people on Facebook and then seeing how they use the platform, because a lot of my work is interested in how people use these social media spaces to operate in. So it's interesting seeing their take or how they utilize these platforms. And then it is great also, because then you invite them to things, and then they might be interested, and then they might go, and then you might have future opportunities from that. So yeah, it's a lot of social media basically that I draw people in, and then I'm super open to whoever comes. And it's always great when people do come, and then you might have worked with people before and they come, and then it's obviously that's what a pro view is. It's great, yeah. But in that sense. And your digital gallery, presumably pretty much the same sort of thing?
Yes, yeah, digital is all promotion on the internet, all getting, I think the digital is a lot harder at times in getting people to actually go into it, because I've contacted a lot of artists in the past where they might have known what I do through As The Sit, and I contact them and they're like, oh, I knew As The Sit through the Instagram, but didn't actually realize it was a website or anything like that, which is always sad, because a lot of the time and effort goes into the website making. So that's all operated by me, and by emailing people and getting people involved with that.
Well, is there a difference between running an online gallery and a virtual gallery and a physical gallery?
I think there's so many differences, and just in terms of, for me, it always comes down to time, money, and like effort involved, I think. So like breaking it down, you can, I think I could, obviously it would be quite tight, but I could start planning a show now and have it launched by the end of the month on the internet. Obviously it's quite tight inviting artists to be a part of things, because they won't.
2 weeks.
Because they won't get back to you in like a week or two. So there are some people that would mess up with, and obviously I wouldn't do that. But there's like the time in aspect, and then there's getting all the works to the gallery, which is always so much more money than I always think. And just in terms of the actual investment into that, it's like, oh, I'll do this, and then it's like, oh, actually, it's gonna be a lot more effort. It's gonna take up lots of my time to install the show. Obviously, installing on the internet is also quite a lot of effort at times, especially if it's a guest curator. So where like we go back and forth about how an exhibition is like coming on the website. But usually, like I could spend my nights doing the website and like up until like 4 o'clock in the morning, like editing. Whereas obviously you can't really do that in a physical space when you're not lying in bed on your computer. So I think there's just, I think money is the main thing for me. I'd do way more offline shows if I had more money and could. I think and it goes back to like paying artists again. Like I always feel, I think it's a mixture of like feeling bad about not paying and being like, so I could not do this and just feel good about myself, but also I'm not going to get anywhere doing that. I'd rather think about the future and think about how doing these things I'll be able to pay artists, and about being able to facilitate them in the future if I do this now. And I think it is a given that everyone is involved with, and when you contact artists, they're aware of it because they sympathise with you, so they know where you're coming from.
I'll come back to the money side later on if I may. How many, do you have a sort of target number of online exhibitions that you put on?
It's just a monthly thing at the moment. It used to be weekly, but I did that for a year and a half, and that slowly, as it became more of a thing, because it began as quite a simple thing, that is a sit in general, but began as like a really simple, just me and being like, oh, I'll do this, and didn't realize it was such a huge thing, online exhibitions. And then as I got more into it, it was like, oh, I need to spend time doing this thing. I need to have some writing with it, of course, like a press release. I need to give context to these shows. And then as I did more of that, it was like, oh, this is actually taking a lot more time. And then also when I start getting curators in, it's like, oh, they spend quite a lot of time on this. And then it's on for a week. It's obviously still online, but the promotion stops. And it's like, I think to give their time and effort and the artist's time and effort, it's like it should be on for way more longer than a week. As like, especially with online, and then you see offline shows, it's like, why would they be on just for a week?
Do you consciously try to do different things online which you couldn't do in a physical show?
I think yes, like obviously like getting artists from like America to do stuff in a very simple way, but then you can play a lot of like how long are people gonna spend on this thing. I think I bet there's some data like in my analytics about it, but it's probably about like 2.5 minutes on the website an average user stays, and that's such a short amount of time compared to like if you've taken the time to travel to an exhibition and walked around a show. So I think I need to do more with that as a thing, because it's so like that's so weird and strange. It's like you spend 2.5 minutes on this thing and you'll probably like see maybe one video or one entire show. I think there's a lot to say about that and a lot to do about that I'm yet to actually make a show about, that like immediacy. I think that's the whole like issue of like viral content and stuff, and how that comes into it, and how Facebook and platforms like that are so like, you'll spend hours on it because it's all about these 10-second videos drawing you in, rather than if I put like a long format half-an-hour video on the website. It's not like it might be watched by like a few people, but the majority are going to like click off that, which is, you know, which is beautiful in a way, but also terrible. Yes. But it all depends, I think.
Well, raised several times the subject of money. Yeah. Obviously that is involved. You talking about wanting to pay artists and this sort of thing. For instance, when you did that exhibition in Docklands, was that, I didn't have to pay anything to go there. It appeared to be entirely free. Yeah. Was there any money involved at all? Did you have to pay for the gallery, for example? So Arbite is a publicly funded charity. So they have various resources and funding spaces that I'm totally not partial to because I didn't work there. I was just invited. So I was,
they like Rebecca, who's the curator there, Rebecca Edwards. She's come to a couple of past shows of mine. She knows my work. She's also done an online show. She curated an online show in partnership with an artist that she was curating for a smaller Arbite space last year. So she knows me, and she's been wanting to get me involved with Arbite for a little while. So she invited me to do the show there, and if I wanted to, and I was like, yeah, of course. So I didn't pay any money for that. I don't usually pay money for the spaces. I don't think I've ever paid anything to do with Is This It for Spacewise. I've always been given that or got that through friends or people I know. And they, after meeting with them, they were happy because I explained that it was to do with the launch, as they knew. So they were happy enough to pay for half of the printing costs for the books, actually, which was fantastic. Yeah, and that was really lovely because that's never happened before, which probably won't happen again for a while.
Just one thing to defend me, the Bicknell exhibition, there were 5 or 6 big monitors?
5 screens, yeah,
Who
5 screens.
those?
So Anchor from Anchor Culties, yeah, those TVs are actually the work. So they get sent spaces whenever that work is shown. So, and because she's London based and really close, I could just borrow them from her storage, which was great. Yeah.
Going over to Is This It, which is a thing you publish every year.
No, it's a triennial.
Triennial, sorry.
So
this is number 4, isn't it?
this is number 4. Yeah. It's 3 times a year. I think that's triennial.
Yes.
And so three times a year. This is number 4. I started, I think the first was published in March last year, like the last few days of March, as an online performance event, which was good, but kind of a failure because, yet again, online. It's like, how much time are people going to spend watching a 2-hour performance, and how much time are you going to get people in? So then, so number 4 now. Currently planning number 5, which will come out in August of some time, I think. I'm kind of getting,
Is there a sort of do you have a particular theme or objective? Because it seems to be a very broad choice of material. And it's not all about you. I mean, some artists publish things that's all about themselves. And also, I was thinking of Stephen Willits's magazine, Control, which is quite a collector's item these days. It's been going for like 30, 40 years. But that is very much about a particular view of art and its social position. Do you have any particular editorial guidelines? It's interesting that you say it's not all about me, because I see it all about me, weirdly, because I'm obviously the only person who does it. I'm the only one contacting artists and selecting works. I always do an open call to keep it very open. And you can always find gems when people randomly contact you, which is fantastic. But usually it's to do with something that I'm doing in my own work. So with this issue, it's all about automation and AI. I was writing that Alexa essay, and then I was like, oh, the next issue could be about automation. And then this would fit really well in that. So usually I write an essay that will go in the issue, and then that allows me to do lots of research to do with the particular topic, and then to draw in and to research artists, and then I'm like, oh, they could work for the issue and all that kind of stuff. So it is very much catered to what I'm interested in at the moment. And so like the upcoming one, Surveillance, which is very broad, and that will be about surveillance, and I'll do an essay for that. So it is focused a lot around my practice, but very broad terms and not very specific. So they could be. So I tried to keep it quite open, but I think if I wasn't interested in it, then it would be like, why am I doing it? Because or I could be like, oh, I'd like to be interested in this. I don't really know much about it. Let's do some research. So maybe, I'm quite open to what they're about. It's just as long as I'm interested in it, because it's going to take up 3 months of my life inviting artists, and it's like if I slowly get bored of it, it's like it's going to be a shame. Again,
and,
it's not a question that you may want to answer, but can you give me some idea of the circulation and whether you get any feedback?
Feedback is something I always really want, and that I get less, not much of. which is a shame. I get people like obviously posting like on social media being like, oh, new issue, great. And I'm like, and people saying, oh, it's really good. And I'm like, okay, that's good. Give me something more. And obviously people keep buying it, which is great. And like, as the issues get more, I'm like producing more copies. It's 100 copies this time and nearly sold out of them. And then obviously the circulation of the online PDFs. But yeah, I get very nothing like proper feedback. Like, I'd love to get proper feedback of someone who's read the whole thing and like give me proper things, like a write-up or something about, or like to get it reviewed. That would be fantastic, or something like that. But yeah, it's in terms of circulation, lots of people buy it. Lots of around the world, people buy it. I get orders from like everywhere, like Canada, US, Australia, various spaces, and then lots of like galleries buy it here. So if like their artist is being shown in it, they'll buy a copy. So Ian Cheng was on the cover last year, for the last one, issue 3, and Pilar Correa's bought a copy, which is cool. Who represents Ian. So it's various things like that. So that it is good getting good circulation. It's just hard to do that without having it in bookshops, which I'm yet to cross over to, I think.
Can I ask you about your work-life balance? I mean, you how much time do you spend doing your own art, and how much time do you spend working on what I might call promotion of art?
It's a lot. It is the majority of what I do, because I am still a student. That affords me a lot of time, and because of such not a relaxed course, but a course that allows you to do whatever you want to do. And coming from a middle-class privileged background, which I'm very aware of, and that's why I'm trying to use as much of my time as possible. But I do also have a job that I do 2 days a week at a gallery, which like does take up my time as well, but obviously not as much time as if I was having to fully fund myself being here. But the majority of my time is spent on doing as I sit and my own work. A lot. It's kind of over the years, since it's become more of a thing, it's taken up a lot more of my time, and it's reducing the time I have on my own projects, which is something I'm very conscious of. But I'm usually I'm in the studio from like 10 till like 8 on a given day, working on as I sit on my own stuff, and then I'll go home and continue working on my own stuff, and then go to private views, of course, in the evenings and stuff, which is obviously great for kind of networking and all that kind of thing. So it's a lot of the day. Yeah.
You're obviously a good networker. Do you do that through the college, or you work?
No, nothing through the college. Okay. That's like, as I say, like, you didn't know I was at Chelsea before, like when you came up and talked to me. I don't really promote it online. I still think that I do think there's a stigma surrounding students, and of course there is, because there are like hoops that you have to jump through to become various stages of your art career, and I'm totally aware of that. And some people, when I do tell them I'm a student, do feel cheated in some way, I guess. But so a lot of the time I don't say that I'm a student. But networking, in terms of networking, it's all over the internet usually, and then it's like rare, lovely occurrences where I'll meet people offline, or I'll see them at a private view and I'll be like, hey, I'm Bob. So most of it is just reaching out to people. And that is lovely, because artists are lovely and curators are lovely, and will get back to you, and usually will get back to you. I've only had lots of times people don't get back to you, because it's totally fine, and I get it. Unfunded projects are really hard again, like to be a part of, and if you're not doing that, that's fine. I'm totally fine with that. And then 1 or 2 mean replies, but other than that, artists and curators are lovely people to interact with online. And then it does get to networking offline, which is great. And then like times at the private view, my private view is fantastic. When lots of people I've met online might come, and it's like, oh, hey, oh, you're that guy or woman or whatever. And it's like, oh, that's great. It's great to meet you and all that stuff. So yeah.
Social media do play a fairly major
Yeah. That's my major thing. And like when I go to a show, I'll always Instagram it, and then I'll always tag the artist and the gallery. And then lots of times I get the artist or the gallery being like, oh, it's interesting you thought that because of this, and like because it was actually supposed to be this. And it's like, oh, maybe we'll work on that. Maybe we'll add that to the press release. I'll have a think about what you said or whatever, which is great. So yeah, and then it is interacting with those people, and then maybe after tagging them or seeing their show, you'll email them and it's like, oh yeah, this is what I do, if you want to see more of it, and then invite them to be a part of it. So it's a great way of showing that you're active, I think. Yeah.
Yes. Just going back to the money side of things, you mentioned that you hoped one day to be able to pay artists. This gives rise to this thorny question of monetising art. And the big problem with digital art obviously is that because you don't have a picture you can hang on the wall and sell, it's quite difficult to do that. Do you have any views on whether and how digital art should be monetised?
I think it's slowly becoming. I've tried to do it with the Is This It shop that I have on Is This It, which has sold a few digital items, but it's very it's not as much as like I would of course hope, but it's kind of okay. But then I think there are really good places that do it really well. Like Data Editions, run by David Grin. He does a great scheme where he I don't know how he's funded, but he must be funded by somewhere, because he kind of commissions artists for new digital, mostly video works, where he commissions them to make a series. They might make 5 pieces, each of them being like an edition of 15 or so. And then you might buy the first piece, it's £200. And then the second time you buy that piece, it's now £400, because as more people buy it, it becomes more valuable. So that's a really interesting kind of scheme to do it, I think. And that's really good. And then obviously there are other spaces online that do it. And obviously galleries that do it. And that are successful, and obviously you always you do hear about the Tate acquiring like digital works, and I think it's slowly becoming a thing. But the more I speak to artists who do have digital practices, are very aware of how their digital art won't be sold, and who either make physical objects like kind of what I'm trying to do because I'm very aware about money and how I could make or even attempt to make money as a artist. But I think they're either very aware that they aren't going to get money and applying for like grants and things to produce works and getting money through that way, or making objects to go alongside their work. It's kind of like performers. I remember going to a Franco B talk and him talking about why he made his sculptural works, and the fact he's like a performer, and the fact that he made these to monetize himself and so that he could fund his performance work, which is totally fair, I think, in that way.
But there's quite an industry, isn't there, in monetizing that? The wilder forms of art.
Yeah, quite liminal practices.
And perhaps lastly, the big question, how do you see the future of digital art?
I think it's slowly getting there. I think people value it a lot more than they used to. I think obviously it's a huge thing now. People have careers that are sole digital artists, and I'm sure they live off of that and live through commissions or producing digital works. And it does get sold still, and you see it being sold. But yeah, I think it's slowly getting there, and it's going to be. It's going to be more valued, I think, in a very simplistic way.
Digital art of people being against monetization, people doing it not for the money, doing it.
Yeah.
Do you think that can last, or will it gradually?
I don't really want it to last if it is still a thing, because I get the kind of pre-internet or kind of like early internet days when it's like this is seen as like an anarchist or kind of very hippiest kind of thing, like using the internet for good. But it's like the internet was never made for you. It was made for like the military at the beginning. So it's like I think that's a very utopian view of kind of making art, and it's like, oh, I don't make art to sell it or to make money. I just make art. It's kind of like it's like what your like granddad would see as like, oh, you do this because you don't make art to make money. You just make it for to feel good about yourself. I think that's a weird way of looking at it. I think, yeah, I think it's obviously great if that's your hobby, but for people who do want to make this their living, which I think they should do, and you should be encouraged more to do, or be allowed to do more of. Digital. I think you should be sourcing money or monetary ways to make money from this, rather than just seeing it as a secondary thing.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
even artists have to eat.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And in terms of changes in the infrastructure and the resources, I mean, when the Computer Art Society was founded, access to a computer was a nightmare. Nowadays, we've all got at least 6 in our pockets.
Yeah.
Things like that. It's changing so much. Do you think there are any other changes in the infrastructure to art, in the environment for art that you'd like to see, or you are seeing?
I don't know. I'm sure there will be, because like obviously digital art is only becoming like a serious thing kind of in the past 10, 20 years.
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay.
It'll be a thing.
Yes.
But more, I don't know, more co-working spaces, more kind of, well, what's the industry? I've forgotten the name of the industry that's like becoming a thing now. It's like the Uber industry where like you'll be paid for a specific time rather than, it's not, I've forgotten what it's called, but it's that type of kind of industry is becoming prevalent. I've forgotten what it is. But
well, certainly, I mean, it does seem to be with digital art in particular, you tend to get more collaboration. The romantic idea of the artist as lone suffering hero.
Yeah.
These days, the artist may be a lone suffering hero, but he needs something to do coding for him or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you do find a lot of group or partners doing art.
Well, a lot of artists have their like team
Yes.
of like 10 people who they thank because they
Yes.
coded the whole thing and you just have the idea,
Yeah.
which is maybe that's not a new thing, because obviously artists always have fabricators, but maybe it's just being more transparent about that now.
I think it's much more common in the Renaissance when painters would have studios, but the romantics perhaps.
It's like, yes, I did that painting. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much
Yeah.
indeed. That's been very
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.